some files from a murder case in the small town of Dartmoor had a bunch of keywords from Master Detective's past cases. The Master Detective arrives to investigate to see if there's any connection or if it's all just one big coincidence. As they investigate, they learn that each person has some sort of connection to their past cases, and the case only gets stranger from there. The Master Detective must then try to solve this first murder before more murders occur. After a long period of making games, specifically from Key to Ravenhurst through Black Crown, the company iPix Entertainment turned creative control of these games over to a company called Grandma. I'm honestly not sure why, but I will say this game does kind of feel like a new company trying to take over a popular gaming series. This game just kind of tries too hard to be a mystery case files game. In this new location, you are introduced to 5 characters. One of them is Marge from the Revenant's Hunt, so an obvious connection there, and one of them, James, the one who was actually dead at the beginning of the game, is Allison Sterling's brother, Allison being basically the main character from Dire Grove who comes back in the Black Veil. But then we have John, who randomly worked on the renovation of Ravenhurst Manor, even though we've never heard about him, despite the fact that renovations were still going on at the beginning of Key to Ravenhurst. And his grandfather worked on the original Ravenhurst Manor, because why not? And then, of course, there's Nigel, who absolutely used to work at Madame Fate, but definitely left in disgrace before we showed up. And then there's Aisling, who is extraordinarily spoilerific, so I'm not going to go into it yet, just in case you don't want to be spoiled. The last part of this game takes place in Dire Grove, supposedly. I say supposedly because we never really see it. We see the iconic sign in a cutscene where we can't really do anything, and then we randomly have to take a back road to the main location we're trying to get to. A location, I might add, that we did go to the previous 2 Dire Grove locations, but that looks so incredibly different that it might as well be a different location. Listen, developers of this game, don't tell me I'm going to Dire Grove if you can't even recreate Dire Grove correctly. I have a very big love for this game, and this is now the second time where a game has said it's going to be about it, and I've only been sorely disappointed. Finally, there are a number of puzzles that were just infuriating. I understand having difficult puzzles, but there were moments that just seemed unnecessarily difficult. I had a number of examples in the script, but I'm not going to do all of them because I feel like that would take too long, so I'm just going to talk about one of them. The puzzle to get into the final location is a puzzle where you have a number of rings and you have to rotate them to create pictures. Some of which were easy to do, but some of which were incredibly difficult because you can't tell where you're supposed to line things up. And you had to create all of these items so that you can click on them. It's like a hidden object scene, but with a bit more interaction to it. And had it been that you just had to create this one overall picture with the rings, then click from there, that would have been fine. But again, each one is its own separate thing. And you have to get it perfectly lined up, or what the game thinks is perfectly lined up, otherwise it doesn't count. And so sometimes you think you have it, you're like, that's very clearly what I'm trying to find, but because it's not lined up perfectly the way the game wants it to be, it doesn't count, which was just not fun. Before I get into spoiler territory, I want to very briefly talk about what I did enjoy about this game. I realized when reading the script that I gave it, like, not a super high score, but a higher score considering the fact that I didn't write a single positive thing about this game. So just very briefly, I do want to say that despite these frustrations, I did still, for the most part, enjoy it. I think the story is interesting, and I think the characters, despite the fact that they're trying too hard to be connected to past cases, are also still really interesting to interact with. And I know that's not a lot of positives to say about it necessarily, but at the end of the day, this is still a game that I enjoy playing, which isn't something that I can say about all of the past Mr. Case Files games. So before I jump into spoiler territory, I will just briefly wrap up just in case you don't want to be spoiled. This game, while enjoyable, is trying a little bit too hard to connect to past installments, and not doing it in a natural way like Moths to the Flame did. The new game developers are focusing too much on past installments, and not enough on showing their own creativity. Therefore, I give this game a 6 out of 10. Back to spoilers, specifically talking about Aisling. She is the other main character who we meet, and she has a mysterious past, not remembering anything about who she is, and having been discovered by Nigel wandering around outside of Dire Grove. She's also a psychic, and she spends a lot of time predicting death. Turns out, she's the Banshee, the main villain from Dire Grove. Honestly though, I don't mind this as much. Mind you, the Banshee did seem a little evil in that first game, considering the whole wanting to freeze the entire world thing, but she was sacrificed to close a portal to another dimension, so I do understand being a little testy. I like this take on the Banshee as someone who is just alerting death, not causing it. And I really like the character of Ashley. But again, it does seem like the game makers are just trying too hard to connect this to past games. The ending of this game, I told you this was going to be spoilerific, is just weird. Ashley regains her true form through some sort of ritual where the 4 victims that I mentioned earlier represent the 4 victims from the original ritual, and she gives the Master Detective this energy that's been kind of seeping through our world throughout the entire game. It does this in a series of mini-games where it reminds us, Reed bludgeons us over the head with the fact, that these 4 victims are connected to our past cases, and I guess the energy represents us? And then the game just ends with the Banshee saying that it's not over. And then there's a post-credits scene where Charles Dalamar comes back. I don't really understand it, but there is a game after this one that's clearly a sequel, so maybe it will be explained then. However, I do think that this game sets a dangerous precedent. It keeps focusing too much on these past cases and doesn't do enough to stop it from being stuck in the past. The problem with this is that it doesn't give the company time to create its own thing. It's just kind of recreating what's already been made, and that's going to get boring very quickly. Maybe this new game will wrap up this trip to the past, and Grandma will be able to create more creative games that don't focus on these past ones and allow them to make these games their own. Honestly, I hope so, but this game certainly isn't that. So, just to reiterate, this game gets a 6 out of 10. And with all of that being said, I will see all of you